we're going to do that. All righty. So anyway, we're fortunate tonight to have with us Duane Matejka from R Sport Engineering. I want to tell you a little story about how I met Duane. Back in the mid-'80s, I really started getting into Volvos. I had a 122, and I was a member of the Washington area Volvo Club, and we had a meet down in Northern Virginia. And on Saturday of that meet, we had a gymkhana, kind of an autocross. First time I'd ever done something like this. And I was backing up, and I saw all these people waving their arms at me, and I looked down, and the temperature gauge had pegged, and there was steam rolling out. Opened up the hood, and I had blown a freeze plug on my V18 motor. And so in Northern Virginia at that time, there were blue laws, probably still are, which meant everything was closed basically on Sunday. And here I was sitting about 150 miles away from home with a blown freeze plug. And who was there but this guy by the name of Duane Matejka? And he said, I think we can take care of this. We can figure this out. And so Dan Johnson from Bayer Volvo, outside of Washington, in Falls Church, Virginia, went and got a freeze plug for us. And you put it in for me, Duane. And that was a long time ago. That's how we met.
Yeah, it must have been 82 or I think something like that. It was, yeah.
A little after that.
Was it after that? Okay.
A little after that. And then we have to fast forward to 2010 when I was just about ready to retire and had been interested in going fast on a racetrack instead of on the highway. And I asked Phil Singer out in the state of Washington if anybody he knew had a race car for sale. And he said, yeah, Duane Matejka's got his race car for sale, best prepared Volvo, vintage Volvo in North America. He's had it for sale for a while, give him a call. So that was how we reestablished that connection in 2010, and it's been a fun 10 years ever since then.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. And I didn't realize it was 10 years. My gosh.
Time really does fly, doesn't it? It's been a good 10 years. So anyway,
yes,
that's the story of how Duane and I know one another, and I thought that it would be really interesting for people to hear your experience, Duane. I've been doing this On the Racing Line column for Volvo Sports America for several years now, and I've done something that I would call a driver profile, and have done this with a number of people who race vintage Volvos, and it just kind of came to me is that perhaps the most successful vintage Volvo racer that I know is somebody who's not racing a vintage Volvo anymore, but who I owe the fact that I have a really nice car too. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to actually hear your thoughts on and your background about this, Duane. So let me first just sort of ask you, how did this all start? Where did the passion for cars begin for you, and when?
Well, I think I had passion for cars before I was even of age, but luckily for me, I grew up near Watkins Glen, which at that time was the home of the U.S. Formula One Grand Prix. So as soon as I got to be 16, I bought a car and immediately started autocrossing it. And then, of course, each year there were three big events. In June, there was this FIA 6-hour endurance race along with the Can-Am, which was at the best years. And then in August, the Trans Am was there with another support race, sometimes Formula 5000, which was a Formula car from England with a Chevy, generally a Chevy V8. And then, of course, the first weekend in October was always the Formula One, which I was very fortunate to see. We went to every race. I mean, saw some of the best drivers in history there, and did things that you really can't even do today. We would camp out and, of course, drink beer. Well, I was only 16, but that didn't affect anything. But at night, you could walk through the garages and at arm's length watch the Formula One mechanics change a gearbox or an engine or whatever they were doing, which was it was phenomenal. So that got me interested. And at that time, a Porsche 356 was just not a very desirable car. And they were cheap. People would rather have an MG. So at any rate, my brother found a real rusty one. And so he was driving that. That was his regular car. And a lady pulled out in front of him and he totaled it. So we took the Porsche engine out of the wrecked Porsche and we put it in, it'll bolt right into a VW. So I immediately had 50% more horsepower, which still wasn't a lot.
Uh-huh.
But I started autocrossing that, and then I actually, back at that time, the track at Watkins Glen was not even closed. You could drive right into the track. So on Sunday, or we would get up early Sunday morning, we'd go up to the track, and there were two gates on the track, one on the back stretch, and then one just where you come up out of the boot. The boot was not there at that time. It was just I think 3.3 mile track. And so we would race around halfway around the track, slow down, drive around the gate, and then race the other half. So I've been at Watkins Glen for quite a while.
So,
and go ahead.
So you were able just to drive in and get on the track?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Stop you?
Nobody stopped you, but it made a lot of noise because I had a header system on the Porsche engine, and there was a glass pack after a couple of years, and it was a used glass pack when I got it. There's nothing in it, so this thing was really loud. So you were up there. I think we did it one time. It didn't get caught, and then the next time we went up, the sheriff drives up. Deputy sheriff drives up, and this is again 1967. So he got out of his car and said, "Look," he stopped us. Had the light on and all that, and says, "You boys can't be doing this." So, "Oh, we're really sorry. We didn't know. And then we would wait like a month, and I think we went and did it again, and didn't get caught. But that got me started, and then I autocrossed it, and I actually sold that car and bought a '67 Mustang Fastback, which was a pretty sweet car. It had a 4-barrel 289, heavy-duty front suspension and disc brakes, and I autocrossed that for a couple of years. And then I guess I was in my last year of college, I started building a Triumph GT6 specifically for SCCAD production. And I raced that car in mostly nationals, SCCA nationals. I picked up a contract customer where I prepared his Formula Ford. So we took both of those cars to the national races. And we didn't, it was a low budget deal. We were racing against the factory team, which was Group 44, which everybody knows, Bob Tullius, and they had all the British land cars. And actually Paul Newman was driving an Group 44 TR6. So you can imagine the competition was pretty stiff, but we did pretty well. I think the best I did though at that time was a third at Lime Rock International, which was not bad considering the competition. And so after that, I sold that and I built a Formula Ford that was the last chassis that Caldwell, which was a very good American-made Formula Ford. They were built in Marblehead, Massachusetts. And it was basically a copy of the English Merlin Formula Ford, and it did well. I put bodywork from a British Formula Ford on it, and the nose was actually from a zinc Formula Ford, which was those were built in Indiana. Mm-hmm. But it was a pretty good looking car, and I did well. I think we started a race. At that time, Formula Ford was by far the biggest class in SCCA. We started an SCCA National at Watkins Glen. There were 61 cars in the field. Oh. And so I never won with that, but I think we in that race, that particular race, I was like fourth, and then in the toe of the boot, I dove inside a guy who didn't see me, and we came together, and that was the end of that weekend. Yeah. We had fun with that car too. In fact, that car ended up here in Pennsylvania, and I actually bought it back a couple of years ago, but it was such a sorry state. I looked at it now. It's too much because the guy had rolled it over the Armco at Watkins Glen. So the chassis was pretty messed up. Uh-huh. And then there was a layoff for a period of time. I was building up my parts business, my P1800 parts business, and I bought a P1800 that was really clean. And I put my guys to work. We stripped it all down, and they scraped all the undercoating off. I think it took us 2 years to build that car. Uh-huh. And that's the car that you ended up with, which we did very well with. As you know, we won a lot of races with it, and you're still winning with it, so I'm happy for that. But that's the route. That's in a nutshell, basically how I got here.
Uh-huh. So was your family mechanically inclined? Did your dad, was he interested in racing in cars?
No, not at all. But the interesting fact is, he and my mom, and I don't know what the attendance numbers were for the first Grand Prix at Watkins Glen. I think it was 1949. That event pulled a lot of people, and I suspect that's why my mom and dad went, because my dad didn't have much use for cars. I mean,
Yeah.
car was transportation, but he
Uh-huh.
was not. My brother and I were. I mean, we started working on cars as soon as we were old enough to drive. But no,
Hmm.
my dad wasn't too much interested in it. But it was interesting that they saw the first Grand Prix,
Uh-huh.
which
Well,
was a pretty cool event.
real history there. You mentioned that you started doing the Triumph stuff when you were in college. You were a mechanical engineer student in college?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Because I had followed racing from the time I was 16. I wasn't a very good student, but I realized mechanical engineering would be the area to go if you were going to develop a car. Mark Donahue was probably one of the best driver engineers, at least in our country, and that's part of the reason for his success was that he was a mechanical engineer.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, I remember when we were at the Rev Institute down in Florida together, looking at the cars, and I stood back and I was watching you, and I realized that I actually said to myself quietly, "This is the difference between how a mechanical engineer looks at a car, at a race car, and how a botanist looks at a race car." And I realized that you were seeing things that I had no clue were even there.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting if you look at it long enough, you start to see things, and this just was pure. Well, it wasn't luck, but it was based on that. When I was at Indy in 2016 with my friend, and the Lotus was there, Jimmy Clark's Lotus was there.
Mhm.
I looked at that, and you could see well, those cars were not. I mean, nothing compared to the sophistication today. But there were some things on that you could see when the rod end was actually hitting the bodywork as if the suspension went up, but they just drove them. I mean, that just. But
Well,
it's and my friend said, "Well, how did you see that?" And I said, "I just, I was just looking at it,
uh-huh, uh-huh.
So, but that's what we do. I mean, you do it today too. You see a car that you're interested in, you stand and you look at it and you look at it until you figure it out.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, yeah. It takes some practice, and I will never get to the point that you are at. But I've learned a little bit by just watching you.
And you always can learn. I'm still learning.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I said that to somebody just recently. You can always, my friend David actually, who has he has two 242 race cars. You can always learn something from someone.
Mhm.
They
Yeah,
don't have to be winning. You can still learn. So
yeah, yeah.
keep an open mind and ask questions.
Right, right. Well, you mentioned the kind of evolution of the 1800 that I have. Was that really your first foray into Volvos, or where did the Volvo whole mantra come from?
Well, we started, it had to be in the late 70s. We started kind of not specializing them, but the P1800 Club was started in Philadelphia by two friends that I knew. And so there were quite a few cars around that, people were driving them regularly. And so we serviced those. I had the, repair shop at the time. So that got me started. And then when we went into the parts business where we were buying cars, I think we parted out more than 100 cars, 100 P1800s over, I guess it was maybe 20-year period.
Uh-huh.
So, we had everything there.
Huh.
And back then, unlike today, I mean, as you know, they weren't expensive cars. They were, it's kind of a parallel to the Porsche. As I said earlier, my brother and I, we had those back when we were in college because they were just, an inexpensive sports car.
Sure, sure.
Of course, the P1800, we're kind of happy for that, has
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah, things have changed a bit. Well, you mentioned the parts business. There are probably some people that don't remember that you were the founder of Foreign Autotech, and they may still see Foreign Autotech being advertised because Mike Dudek, who bought Foreign Autotech from you, still actually uses that name at times.
Yes.
So
Yes, he does.
tell us about that how Foreign Autotech really kind of took place.
Well, that Foreign Autotech was our repair shop. It was just me and one employee, And that was started in 70, gosh, I guess we go back 77 or 78, I think. And then we did service probably until about 12 years, until about 1990. And then, we were buying so many P1800s for parts and selling new parts all over the country that we just kind of got away from the service. And we actually had, at times I had 3 employees, selling parts. So, I mean, we could, I got to the point where my son and his friend who worked for me, I didn't even touch the car. So we'd bring a car in, and a day and a half later, there would be nothing left. We would have everything, and with the shell, the rusty shell would be taken away, and everything else would be on the shelf,
So you were selling both used parts and new
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Where did the new parts come from? Did you have contacts in Sweden, or?
No, back then you could, I mean, they were readily available through, I mean, we had 4 or 5 wholesale suppliers. They were, and we would buy in quantity. I mean, we'd buy 10 of each item at a time, and they were, I mean, the suspension pieces were Lemforder from Germany. And so they, they supplied the newer products, and so you could still get them. But of course, that's all changed now.
Yeah. So now it's just a very few suppliers, and
right.
Some things just plain no longer available. Bosch parts oftentimes are no longer available.
Right.
Or if they are, they're so expensive that you can barely afford them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when did you sell Foreign Autotech? When did that you get out?
I think it was 2004. And Mike, as we know, is still going strong with it, but he does the service as well.
Right.
And he does transmission rebuilds and brokers cars and sells cars. So, but yeah, he's still going.
Yep. Yeah. We have quite a relationship. I one time told him that I thought I was going to take care of sending his kids to college.
Yes.
He's got plenty of business, that's for sure. A good guy. A lot of.
Oh no, he is a good guy. Mike's a terrific guy.
So the car that which was just sort of pictured in Sports Car Digest, which was named Mobile One of all things. I'd never heard it being called Mobile One, but it's got the Mobile One sticker on the door, so I guess it makes sense to be called that. We call it One Red, but in any case, that came about in the mid to late 90s.
Yeah, I started that in 94, and it wasn't finished until the race, and it was finished the night before we loaded the trailer to go to Blackhawk for the first vintage Volvo Grand Prix. And we had some issues. The car was strong, but we had some leakage around the carburetors and another smaller issue. I can't remember exactly what it was. So we didn't do too well there, but after that we did very well.
So what was that in 1995?
96. That was 96. Yeah, the first one was in 1996, and then of course Road America 2 years later, 98.
Well, just recently I found some of the old issues of Volvo Sports America's C's magazine, and here's.
Oh, you got one? Okay.
Here's your car
right.
in. Let's see, this would be 1996. Yeah. Well, it actually says January, February 1996. And then you had a whole list of all of the Volvo racers. And it's interesting to look at this. There were 38 Volvo racers listed. And you know what? Probably 30% of them are still doing it.
That's good.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So I recognize the names. But you started out with a number 96, and somehow or another it got to be number 1. You want to tell me about that?
Well, in most road racing series, if you're if you win a championship, the next year you can take number 1. And I always thought that was a psychological advantage to have that. So as soon as I won the first Volvo Historic Series championship in 1997, I said I'd like number 1, and then it worked for mobile because we were able to promote them with it, and then it just stuck, and I mean, of course, we won it 5 years in a row, and after that nobody even tried to get number 1. We just kept it, and I don't know why. They could have, somebody won it. Well, he was a good friend. There was a guy with a Porsche 911. He won it, I think, in 2000, whenever. whatever the year was, and he didn't ask for it, so we just
I
kept it.
see. And how did the Volvo Historic
But I've heard it.
start?
I have heard it. Go ahead. I'm
No,
sorry. Go ahead.
continue your thought.
No, it's gone away already, Jim.
Okay.
What I was going to say, I think it had to do with the number one. I think I have heard your car referred to as one, and it may be our friend Dave Farrington. I think he may have used that expression. So it wasn't the first time I'd heard it. So I'm surprised for you that it was.
Oh, okay. All right. How did the Volvo Historic Series come about?
That was started by a good group of people at Volvo Cars North America. Bill Hoover, and he was a vice president. Bob Lawson, a vice president. Fred Hammond, who was the director of communications, I believe, at the time. And trying to think if there was someone else involved in that. But Bob and Bill were racing, I'm not sure what it was, an 850 or something in SCCA at the time. So they became pretty good friends with the people in the northern New Jersey region of SCCA. And so they decided that, well, we should start this. It was a great idea. We'll start this series for production in sedans, and we'll call it the Volvo Historic Series.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a hit right from the get-go. It was just wonderful people. I mean, the greatest people that you'd ever want to meet. And there was full grids at Lime Rock. We would get, I think we had 36 or 38 cars, and you can't have many more than that because it's only 1.5 miles long. And so Volvo funded it. I think we paid, as entrants, we paid $150 per event. And the first couple of years, there was prize money at the end, and they took that away because, people got a little bit aggressive with their interpretations of the rules. So Bob said, well, you're going to do it with money, which was all right. We didn't, we weren't there for the money. Yeah, that went on for 5-6 years, I think. It was just a great series. Like I said, just good people, good times. And yeah, it was fond memories of that.
Well, there are at least 5 stickers that say Volvo Historic Series Champion on the door of my car, and I have to be honest. I said that was well before I ever was the driver of this particular car. But it tells you what the capability of the car is, not what the driver can do today, but what the car was able to do.
Well, and surprising, it was a while ago, Jim. I mean, I think the last one was 2002, so we're working on, it was 20 years ago.
It's amazing that Carl would last that long, huh?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's still going.
You met Mitch Duncan during this period of time as well?
I didn't, because Mitch was the parts manager for the West Coast, even though, and he was a California guy, grew up in Southern California, a real hot rodder. And I only met him, I may have met him once before, but when he retired, he came back to New Jersey because that's where his wife was from. And he, as you and I know, bought the Holman and Moody P1800, and that's how I got to meet and know Mitch and become friends with him. Yeah, right. Now Mitch's car resides in Ontario with Dan and Bonnie Reynolds from near Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. The car's going strong. Every time I look at that car, I'm just amazed. It's beautiful. It's just plain. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, and when Mitch got it, of course, it didn't look like that. When he raced in the Volvo series, it was as he got it. But then he had it redone, and it is a beautiful car. Really good-looking car. And Dan's having fun with it. Well, he certainly is, and it's a force to be dealt with. I'll tell you. Is it? That's good. Absolutely. Yep. Dan's gotten better over the years. He's darn competitive right now. Yeah. No, he's got a competitive spirit, that's for sure. That's right. Well, there are probably people also that don't really realize the association that you had with perhaps the most famous Volvo driver in the world, and that's Irv Gordon. Tell us about the relationship you had with Irv and some of the stuff that you did with his 66S. Well, I met Irv, golly, probably in the late 70s. He was part of the P1800 club. So we would have the Sunday meetings. I mean, it wasn't regularly, but with the club meetings were held in just outside of Philly, and Irv would come down. So I knew him for probably 35 years. And we became, yeah, everybody's a friend of Irv's, but, he just was a great guy.
Mhm.
And, so we just, whenever we saw each other, we had a good time at the events. And then he about, I guess it was 2008, he told me that the engine was really getting tired, and so I said, well, look, I bring it in, we'll rebuild it. So it went on. He drove it, he drove it some more, probably 6 months, and then we brought it in and we rebuilt the engine. And it shows what a good driver he was, because the car had 2.7 million on it when I rebuilt it, and he had it done on Long Island when the car only had 650. So whatever that math works out to be, 2.1. And it was remarkable that he could. But I remember one time he came to the races, vintage races at Lime Rock, and he stayed at the hotel, the same hotel as my wife and I were at. So we got up in the morning, and I heard Bob Austin make reference to this later. When he get up in the morning, he would warm the car up, and then when he left, it was like a little old lady. He just never abused that car, never. I mean, acceleration or braking, and in 3.2 million miles, he never got a ticket, which is it's hard to believe, but it was his driving style, and that's what preserved the car. That and his maintenance. He was meticulous. As you know, he carried oil in a filter. Right. If he was in Kansas City and the thing hit 6,000 miles since the last, it'd be into a parking lot, change the oil, and that was it. But Irv was a great guy. I miss him.
Yeah. He was kind of particular about who got behind the wheel, wasn't he?
Yeah, I didn't know when I rebuilt the engine, he didn't want anybody driving it. I know when he was on Jay Leno, I don't know if he did it in the interview, but Jay wanted to drive it. And so Irv said to him, well, he didn't let on that I don't let people drive my car. He said, well, yeah, I'll let you drive it, but then I get to drive my choice of all yours. And we all know what Jay is. So that ended that conversation. Jay never got to drive it. But when I got done I was running late and rebuilding his engine. He was coming down to pick it up on Saturday, and I forget, we had an ignition problem or something. So I didn't finish it. If I had finished it a day before, I would have got in the car just like every other engine I'd rebuild and driven it down the road, which I didn't know I wasn't supposed to do that. But excuse me, I don't really think he wouldn't have complained.
Did you let him know that you had driven it?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't have hid it from him because I didn't know. I really did, because he wasn't like that. He wouldn't go around saying, "Well, I don't want you driving my car." But then I found out later that he's like, "Yeah, nobody drives this except me."
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I've met Irv a couple times, and one time we were able to talk him into coming out to a very major car show in central Wisconsin, and I was able to convince the organizers that he should be the center of attention. And I want to tell you, he was the center of attention. There was a crowd around that car and around Irv constantly for the 3 days of that car show, and he never stopped smiling.
I know that was the beauty of it. It was just, I mean, he was the greatest ambassador ever for a car company. I mean,
he really was.
And he would go do that they would open a dealership. He would drive across the country and stand there all day with a smile and greet people for 2 days straight. And never, it was just, that was Irv,
Yeah.
He loved the car and promoted.
Yeah. Well, everybody misses him, that's for sure. And thankfully, Volvo has the car now, and it will be kind of preserved for all of history. The last I saw it, Volvo had it, and Scott Deering showed me a picture of the trunk, and the trunk looked like there was no place for any other spare parts there because they were still in there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, that was one thing about him. He carried a part, any part that might break, he carried.
Yeah, they're right. Yeah. What sort of projects are you working on now with R Sport Engineering? What do you got going on?
Well, I'm building the two new cars for the 2022 Peking to Paris Rally, a 73 ES and a 66 122 wagon.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, we didn't get the ES in. I was offered the co-drive in that, and I was looking forward to it. But this event drew 850 applicants for 130 entry spots. So obviously, not everyone's going to get in. So, but we're going to run another rally in the ES. I'm not sure which one. There's one in South America. That runs from Lima down to the tip of South America. But the 122 wagon will be in it, and it's a big project to prepare a car for that event. So that's keeping us busy. And then my friend David, who has the 242s, has just recently bought Eric Curran, who was an IT racer, became a pro driver. He raced a 240. A 242 in ITB SCCA for a while, and my friend David bought that, and we are restoring that from the ground up, which is a big project because it passed through quite a few hands, and then it's in need of most everything. So that's enough to keep us busy through next summer probably.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I've been to your shop, and anybody who hasn't, I can just say that it's something to lust after, that's for sure. Is there anything that you don't do? I guess you don't bore or do line boring, or you don't do cylinder work yourself, or do you?
No, I don't. I send all of that out. The only thing I do, but I do a little bit of head work. But I'll do some light porting, which I don't want to do a full head anymore, because we know you can ruin the head and then have to start all over again. So we've gotten away from that. But the machines to do that are so specialized, and the precision needs to be so great to make the engine right that we send that out.
I see.
The crankshafts in the block to be bored and honed with a head. All the engines get a head plate. Even a street motor gets the head plate, because these blocks are a little bit weak, and with respect to rigidity. And so to get the bore perfectly concentric, we use a head plate. But that's about it. Yeah, the machining is all sent out.
But you say they're a little bit weak, and we both know from our own experience with head gaskets that the clamping forces on a Volvo head are not exactly what a small block Chevy would have, or even a Ford motor, something like that. But that said, they're pretty meaty sometimes. Didn't you have opportunity to bore Irv's motor out pretty far beyond what most people would expect?
Yeah, actually, the 67, 68 B18 block can be bored to B20, which I can't even remember the number on that. But we went to 100 thousandths pistons on Irv's, because at the time that he had his rebuilt at 650,000, Volvo sold 60 thousandths over pistons, and so you can't get those anymore. And so we knew that's out. So we were going to have a custom piston made, which we did. And Irv didn't want the car down for any length of time. So rather than make a mistake and get a piston that wouldn't do us any good, we just said, well, we'll do it. 60 is the max they could have done in whatever year it was, back in the late 60s, early 70s. So we had pistons 100 thousandths over bore made, and they were much lighter than the stock pistons, and the whole engine was balanced to racing specs. And so Irv was very happy with it. It was a very smooth running engine.
How did you figure out that you could go that far over? Did you sonic test it, or see the wall thickness?
IPD used to regularly sell a big bore kit for a B18. So generally, I never did it with an earlier B18 block, but if you look at a late 67 or 68 B18 block, it's basically a B20 block with a casting saying it's a B18, because it has the boss on the side of the driver's side of the the cam drive cover, there's 2 bosses to bolt the air conditioning compressor in. So that will tell you that it's a late 67, and that again has enough, well enough meat in it to bore to a B20, which again I think it's 180 thousandths.
Wow.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I don't recommend it. I mean, for longevity, but you can do that. Yeah. So Irv's was well within safe specs.
Well, it went for a long time after that even. So I guess certainly it had to be.
Yeah, he put what 500,000 on it, I guess.
Yeah.
And no problems.
Yeah. Well, the one question that I really need to ask you is that, given all of your successes in amateur racing, you did it both SCCA and vintage racing with different sanctioning bodies, right?
Right.
Did you ever have aspirations to become a professional driver?
Oh, sure. Volvo gave me 4 S40s. These were cars that were stripped and put vertically on billboards high in the air. So it was just a shell, and they had to get rid of them when they were done. And they said, Dan Johnston called and said, "Do you want these?" I said, "Sure, we'll take them." So we got them, but unfortunately it was just before the economy dropped, in 2007, 2008, and sponsorship dried up. But those cars will probably be raced by my friend Irv Stein in AER, which is American Endurance Racing. And it should be a fairly competitive car. We had help from Don Nicholson from Evolve. They did some work on the ECU, and he built an exhaust, and so the cars will have good power. But yeah, I would have really liked to run those in World Challenge. If we would have gotten the funding, I think we could have been competitive in World Challenge. But it's one of those things.
You certainly had a lot of success even long before that. So say in the late 90s, I would have been thinking about, well, what can I do after this?
Well, the problem with racing, road racing especially, is that it just takes funding. I mean, if you look at most pro series, and it's not a new phenomenon. Emerson Fittipaldi back in 1971 bought his way in, and Niki Lauda, who is one of the greatest drivers ever, as you know, if we watch this, there's a couple of really good documentaries on Netflix of him. He did the same thing. So and again, especially in endurance racing today, when you look at the drivers, it's not like they were sought out and paid to drive the car. It's kind of, maybe a little bit of the reverse of that.
They brought the money to the table.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's a sponsor, and then more power to them if they can do it. If you can if you have connections with a big multinational company and they're willing to write the check to race.
Right.
That's going on today in Formula One. But this kid's good, Lance Stroll. I think he just in Monza he finished 3rd. So it's they have the money and the ability.
Yeah.
So no team is going to go out and pay a guy when someone that brings money and has the ability, and can succeed. So.
Well, you think about the contrast of today's drivers versus when we started. You started autocrossing when you were 16. When I was 16, I was thinking about driving my mom's '59 Ford and keeping it out of the ditch. But we never started in go-karts when we were 3 years old the way they do now.
Right.
And
the
development of talent is so sophisticated. Kind of we learned on our own, and I learned well beyond when you started learning. So basically mine started when I retired. I've always been kind of interested in cars, but nothing like what we're doing now.
Now, and the talent needed to drive, especially a Formula One car today, that's very rare. I mean, if you look, there's a good video, I believe it's on YouTube, at Spa in Belgium, and the DTM is it's a carbon fiber chassis touring car. They build the whole car, so it's very, very light. severely sophisticated,
Mhm.
and they show you a film of that really fast car going up the hill at Spa,
Mhm.
and then they show you one with a Formula One car, and it's like night and day.
Huh, really?
It shows, yeah, that a Formula One car today is pulling 5 Gs in the corner. When back in the day, a Formula One, when I started watching them in the 60s, if they probably, I'm guessing here, they might have pulled not quite 2, maybe 1.5, between 1.5 and 2. A Trans Am car would pull a G, and there's a lot of high performance cars today on street tires that will pull a G. So
Mhm,
that's how far it's gone.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Well, what do you think about some of the stuff that's happening, particularly in Sweden with, I guess, I'm not sure we should call them 1800 clones or what they are. They're doing everything's crazy with them, turning carbon fiber bodies out and everything else. What do you think about all that?
I saw that it's Cyan, I believe, which used to be Polestar until
Yeah.
Volvo bought it. It's kind of like a retro mod, I guess. And I don't know, when you look at the marketing plan for that, it's almost like they're going to make more than one, but I don't know. It's the one that they have, I suppose, is for sale. But again, when you read their website, it's like, we can build you one of these.
Right.
I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it's hard to understand how there can be any market for this. I saw something that came over the internet, I believe yesterday or today, and it's basically give us your 1800 and we will essentially remove all the rust from it. We'll put carbon fiber panels on it and turn it into a car that it has to sell for well north of $100,000. And I just can't imagine how anybody can make a living doing that because the market can't be that great.
No, it is. Where is this done? Is this in Sweden?
I think it is. I think it was in Sweden. I'd have to check it out again. But yeah, it's contact us. There was no price tag on it. It says contact us.
I can tell you from what it costs to build a P2P car, or
Yeah.
the Peking to Paris rally car.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to do it for 100.
Yeah, it's all they got. I don't even know how to estimate it, but this is for people different than us, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it had 470 horsepower, so it should go.
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, Duane. Is there anything that I missed about your career and about the Volvo saga that you have lived for so many years that you might want to share with everybody?
I don't think so, Jim. I think you covered it all. It's been a pleasure. I thank you. It was an honor.
Well, I have to say it's been a real honor to have the friendship. I don't think that anybody can really appreciate, if they haven't done this, all of the advice that you have given me and the amount that I've learned just from listening to you. Anytime I needed some help, you were always there with advice and with a good attitude about it. So I
appreciate that.
Friendship that we've had.
I'll continue to do that. And you've taken great care of the car. So I thank you for that.
So far, we're doing okay. So thanks very much.
Still winning and keeping the shiny side on top.
Yep. So far, the shiny side's always been in the right place.
Good for you.
Well, thanks a lot, Duane.
Thank you, Jim.
Appreciate it, and we will be in touch in the near future, I'm sure.
All right. You stay well.
Okay. You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
The recording's done now.
Okay, we're good?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay.
So thanks very much. I really do appreciate this.
Enjoyed it.
I think I got to get my glasses on. I took my glasses on. I'm vain enough to not want glasses on. Pause, stop recording. Okay.